citizen involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order now. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Here.
Here?
Present.
Here.
Thank you. Right. Also, first on our agenda tonight is a council update. Councilor Mans, would you like to give us a council update?
Yes, I would. There is not much to report right at this moment. We will be having a special meeting on Thursday regarding the lake, which will probably be more interesting than not. Otherwise, things are moving along as they should be. We are looking at LORAC, which would be the golf course and pool, et cetera, et cetera. There have been some cost issues on the golf course, but I believe that those are now being worked out as far as funding is concerned. Apart from that, again, as I say, things are going along. The wastewater treatment plant continues to roll along as it should. Our last meeting was extraordinarily short, so I have not a lot to report from that. You'll have to forgive me. I'm holding my phone. I am not in town, so if my hand drops, it's because my arm is getting tired. I would like to ask at this point if there are any questions that anyone may have of me before I leave this meeting and let you get on with your business at hand.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Mans. Commissioners, any questions for Councilor Mans? You know, Councilor Manzo, one question that we had, there's been a lot of discussion, and in fact, in the one of the next agenda items, I'm going to talk about a neighborhood association meeting notice where they encourage walking and biking. But as everybody knows, with the rising gas prices that we're seeing nationwide, and I don't expect you to know this, but I was just wondering if you might have any ideas that, you know, there was an article that I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal that talked about, you know, people that own EVs, the challenges that they're having with chargers currently, and you know, something like 30 to 60% of them are commonly broken. And so one of the things that we've heard from the community has been the chargers here on Avenue A, the public chargers. I believe those were, you know, given or installed by Tesla. So, you know, the City of Lake Oswego is giving prime real estate to one particular vendor, Tesla. But I think the community has kind of an expectation that Tesla would make those operable, and they've been out for several months. And then I've also noticed down at the maintenance facility, the ChargePoint chargers that are owned by Lake Oswego, those are off the network and they're unavailable. So are there any updates? Have you heard anything about looking at the state of the chargers that we have at Lake Oswego, and any updates from, like, you know, getting those functional again?
I know that we amongst ourselves have been talking about that very issue, but I will make a note to talk to Martha Bennett about that when I'm back in town. And I will be back in town for the meeting on Thursday. Well, actually, I'll be back in town for our meeting, and I'll see if I can find out any information on that perhaps before we have our interview meetings coming up, because I've heard both from citizens and both from my colleagues that this is a problem and should not be happening in a city in Lake Oswego where we're working so hard to electrify. So I will let you certainly know about that.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if there's anything that would come in scope with the Plan Commission, but fundamentally it seems wrong to have, you know, one supplier take a prime section of Lake Oswego real estate and then somewhat just abuse it, you know, to have those chargers not be functional, and at the same time people aren't able to park, you're not able to charge. So I don't know if there's any land use policy that we could do, but you know, I'm certain the commission would be happy to look at that if council asked, and if it did fall within the scope of the Plan Commission. You know, the policy on allowing a certain manufacturer to basically own that area of real estate and own the charging there.
I will turn that over to both Mr. Boone and to Mr. Lewis to look at from a legal standpoint to see what the contractual obligations are. But there's no reason why, say, for example, and I am not making any sort of what can I say? I'm not advocating for Ford, for example, to be able to put in chargers or Chevy, but there may be others who wish to do the same thing that would have a more reliable product. I can't say that for sure, but let me find out what I can find out about that.
All right, thank you, Councilor Mans. I believe
Thank
there's no
you.
other questions. Yeah, thank you for your commentary tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right, next on the agenda is item number 4, public comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. It's an opportunity to raise issues regarding planning. A time limit of 3 minutes per individual applies. Iris, was there anyone who wished to make a public comment tonight?
Yes. Let's see. Ruchi Danawala.
Please come forward. If you'd just like to state your name for the record, and then go ahead and give your comment.
First time doing this allocated where we're providing the comment. It's actually regarding the property, the map planning, so.
Okay, I think then we'd ask you to defer until we get to item 7.1 on the agenda. And then when we open it up for public testimony, at that time, we can call you. Yeah, this is a different agenda item. This is for items not on the agenda right now for public comment. So we'd ask that you just defer your comments until we get to the agenda item. All right, thank you. All right, we'll move to item number 5 on the agenda. This is the Commission for Citizen Involvement general updates. We did have one item on the agenda, or one item to discuss tonight. This is the McVeigh South Shore Neighborhood Association's Ice Cream Social and Annual Meeting. It's to reconnect with longtime neighbors, meet new ones. It's a neighborhood celebration, including ice cream games, and then maybe a city fire truck may visit, according to the McVeigh South Shore Neighborhood Association. You'll be able to meet neighborhood association leaders, get updates about new neighborhood supermarket, the Recreation Aquatic Center, Lusher Farm, and share your ideas. All are invited. The McVeigh South Shore Neighborhood Association meeting will be held on Saturday, June 25th, 2022, from 3 to 4:30 p.m. It's at the Ash St. Cul-de-sac, north of McVeigh, a few doors down from 1448 Ash Street. They encourage walkers and bikers. And for more details, you can visit the McVeigh South Shore Neighborhood website. Again, the date is Saturday, June 25th at 3 p.m. So encourage everybody to join. Yeah, I think that was it for Commission for Citizen Involvement. Next, we'll move on to item number 6 on the agenda. These are the minutes. The first set of minutes are the April 25th, 2022 minutes. These are action minutes. The topic at the night was that we talked about citizen involvement. The Neighborhood Association for Policy Aids was having its annual meeting. There were the minutes from March 28th, 2022. And then we discussed the Community Development Code amendments related to middle housing, LU 22-0007. Commissioners, are there any clarifications, changes that anyone wishes to make to the action minutes for April 25th, 2022? No changes?
I move that we approve.
There's a motion to approve the April 25th, 2022.
I second that.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion is approved.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Thank you. Next are the May 9th, 2022 meeting minutes. These were the action minutes that covered The Commission for Citizen Involvement, the Evergreen Neighborhood Association annual meeting was discussed. The minutes from April 11th were reviewed and approved. And then again, we looked at the middle housing, LU 22-0007. Commissioners, are there any changes or corrections that people want to suggest? Vice Chair Pepe?
In reviewing the remaining 2 minutes, can we go ahead and approve both at the same time, or do we have to do it?
We can consent to approve
You-
both.
Yeah, you can do them together in one motion unless somebody moves to sever.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Boone.
I'll make a motion to approve the May 5th and May 23rd.
One correction there, if you want to amend the motion, it's the May 9th, 2022. Yeah.
Oh, what did I say, 3rd? Sorry, May 9th.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there's a motion to approve the May 9th, 2022 and the May 23rd, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The minutes for May 9th and May 23rd are approved. Thank you. So next we'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda. This is the public hearing. This is the comprehensive plan map and sensitive lands atlas amendments, LU 22-0015. Public testimony is accepted and we'll call for that. So if you just wait until we say that we're ready to take the public testimony. The commission will hold a hearing to consider a request by the City of Lake Oswego for an amendment of the Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan Map and Sensitive Lands Atlas to designate approximately 2.9 acres of resource protection, RP, overlay district for a Class 1 wetland on 2 parcels totaling approximately 5.01 acres pursuant to LOC Chapter 50.07.004.8. The properties are located at 13570 and 13580 Goodall Road. The staff coordinator is Paul SP.
Mr. Chairman, I'll read the hearing procedure.
Sure, thank you, Attorney Boone.
This request is to be considered based upon the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria and standards identified by staff that were applicable to the request. It was available online and from the planning department. Evidence and testimony must be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you specifically identify to the commission the criteria or standards you're addressing so the commission may consider your testimony in relation to those criteria or standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issues to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise any constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Hearing process will be as follows. First, presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes. Then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and finally testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following that will be the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. Now, those time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed that persons are testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of written materials was noon today. No written materials may be submitted to commission tonight. Any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence by requesting a continuation of the public hearing. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have bias on the application, and any financial conflicts of interest declare. Commissioner Leake.
None.
None.
Yeah, none, no ex parte contact, no site visit, no bias.
No, sir.
Is there any objection or challenge to a commissioner's right to consider the application? Seeing none, I would then ask for Associate Planner Paul Espy with the staff report.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, again, Chair Heap, members of the commission, good evening. We have before us this evening a request by the city to designate approximately 2.9 acres of resource protection overlay district on 2 lots of approximately 5 acres. This requires amendments to the comprehensive plan and sensitive lands atlas. The study that was submitted by the applicant as a part of this application included 3 parcels that make up the project site, but the wetland resource was only found on the 2 southerly parcels. In order to include the individual property or a portion of the property within the RP overlay district, the reviewing body needs to determine whether a resource is significant through a wildlife habitat assessment score, or HAS, and then in compliance with the statewide land use planning goal 5, evaluate it through an ESEE analysis to determine if it merits an RP overlay designation. The proposed RP district is a Class 1 wetland, and its protected riparian area will be added to either side of the existing RP district along Nettle Creek. This amendment will become effective upon the annexation if it's approved by council and of course, the Planning Commission. Property is located on the east side of Goodall Road near its intersection with Hazel Road. The site addresses are 13570 and 13580 Goodall Road. The combined area, again, is 5.01 acres. Comprehensive plan map and zoning designation of the annex property is R15, and the 2 southerly properties will also be designated R15 as shown in the comprehensive plan map. A stream identified as Nettle Creek on the city's GIS mapping system and as Goodall Creek in the wetland delineation report prepared by Environmental Science and Assessment ESA flows south through the central portion of the site as shown on the aerial photograph you're looking at right now. The report also identifies a large wetland located on the subject properties that surround the stream on 13570 and 13580 Goodall Road. The applicable criteria for the comprehensive plan map amendments are listed in the slide and addressed in greater detail in the staff report. The city has provided public notice and opportunity to comment on this application pursuant to LOC 500703.3C. This is an application for an amendment to the comprehensive plan and sensitive lands atlas to designate the RP resource. Details about the development or how many lots we propose will not be discussed and is not within the scope of this review this evening. Future development will be the subject of a separate application to be considered by the Development Review Commission in the future after the property is annexed. The landowner applied for the annexation and the city assessed the resource. The wetlands surrounding the stream corridor was found to be significant, and the resources proposed now would be designated on the comprehensive plan, map, and sensitive lands atlas. The RP resources will then be formally designated with the base zone when the property is considered for annexation by the council, tentatively set for October 4th. The resource can be further delineated at the development review phase of the project when they come in with the actual project, if the applicant chooses to do so. The wetland was evaluated by a qualified professional using the standard HAS worksheet. This resource received a score of 62 and qualifies as a Class 1 wetland. In other words, you need a HAS score of 35 or greater for an RP zone to be designated, and then a score of 50 or more to earn the Class 1 rating. The Resource Protection Overlay District is applied to qualified streams and wetlands, and this overlay restricts development in the resource area. And in this case, it would require a 50-foot buffer. It would require a 50-foot buffer. This is the existing map This is what is shown in the comprehensive plan and zoning maps today. Of course, it's only on the comprehensive plan map for those properties that have not been annexed, 13570 and 13580. And then it would be on the comprehensive plan and zoning map for 13560. So that includes the RP resource that you see in blue, and also the HBA designation that you see in light green. Those mapping designations are already established. This map shows the proposed designation of approximately 2.9 acres of wetland as an RP district on the 2 parcels, as shown in Figure 1.2, and was also established in the submitted wetland study by the applicant. And as stated in the introduction, if the annexation results in the application of the city zoning and any associated overlay designations, and where evidence indicates that a resource that potentially qualifies for an RP, RC, or HBA overlay, the city may evaluate the natural resources on the property and determine if such a zone should be imposed. Under Goal 5, the resource is evaluated under an ESEE analysis. The city evaluates the resource through an economic, social, environmental, and energy, or ESEE analysis in compliance with the statewide land use planning Goal 5 to determine if the resource merits a sensitive lands designation. The ESEE analysis identifies potentially conflicting uses, their impacts, and the impact area. The city must then propose a program to allow, limit, or eliminate those impacts, which is the acknowledged sensitive lands, which is acknowledged in the sensitive lands overlay provisions of LOC 500510. For wetlands, using the Oregon Freshwater Wetland Assessment Methodology and ESEE, a habitat assessment score is assigned to quantify their value. And again, resources that receive an HAS of 35 or greater or are exceptionally scenic are considered significant resources. And then if it's above 50, it's a Class 1. The ESEE analysis identifies potentially conflicting uses and assesses the environmental, social, economic, energy consequences of allowing, prohibiting, or limiting the conflicting uses. The ESEE analysis concluded that the subject properties contain significant wetland habitat resources that could be negatively impacted if intensified by residential development. These impacts can be reduced by the development restrictions the city is able to impose through the sensitive lands overlay provisions of LOC 500510. And based on the information presented in the report and the ESE analysis that were prepared by staff, the designation of an RP Class 1 overlay for the wetland on the subject tax maps 00200 and 00300 are justified. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that they approve 220015. The existing and proposed sensitive lands overlaid zoning overlays will become effective upon the annexation. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Planner SB. Commissioners, any questions for Planner SB? Commissioner Lee?
So if this goes through, that HBA, that habitat protected area, whatever, becomes unbuildable, correct? There's no bridging over the sensitive wetlands area to provide a building site in that area?
The HBA is actually a voluntary no-build zone. So property owners actually can build on the HBA zone.
If they can get to it through the RP.
And the code allows for certain passages through the wetland, with roadways, depending upon whether or not the applicant provides adequate mitigation for those impacts.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to follow on that, Planner SB, I believe when we looked at modifying the HBA code some years ago, we also included incentives, right? So that if they were to voluntarily comply with certain conditions of the HBA, there would be incentives for them and their development.
That is correct.
So there is some kind of benefit there.
Chair Eapen, Planner Espy, if I may, there are two, I think, important policy implications of that. One is just what you were pointing out, that the HPA designation provides flexibility in certain development standards that wouldn't otherwise be available for development, provided that an applicant voluntarily protects more of that area or the area that's designated HPA. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that when the city went through an update to its natural resources program and adopted the HPA designation and amended the requirements for the RP districts, the wetland and stream protections, the riparian protection areas for RP districts were expanded. They were made wider from what they were previously. It used to be for a class 1 stream, the protection area was 30 feet. And these areas where HBA exists, or where formerly the RC districts existed, the protection area was extended from 25 or 30 feet to 50 feet. So there's greater protection afforded along that stream because of the presence of upland habitat.
Attorney Boone?
Thank you. Sorry for staff comments here. I would just remind the commission that this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so the question is whether or not the area identified qualifies as a wetland under our standards. This is not the time to decide whether it's a good idea for those, what the implications are. It's just whether it qualifies or not. As Planner Espy indicated, the development rights would be addressed at the time of development applications. So it's just a question of whether or not it meets those standards or not. The other just procedural point I wanted to make is that the applicant in this case is the City of Lake Oswego, and the owner is separate. In the staff report, sometimes you'll see the applicant is referred to as the owner. I mean, it's pretty from the context, it's the owner when they were using the term applicant. But I think that's in relation to the owner is requesting annexation. They are the applicant for the annexation. But for purposes of tonight, the applicant is the City of Lake Oswego.
Thank you, Attorney Boone, for those clarifications. Vice Chair Pepe?
Got a little confused on the clarification that you provided there, and I apologize. Is the owner of the property applying for this, or is it the City of Lake Oswego?
Well, the City of Lake Oswego is applying for the overlay zone designation on the property.
Okay, so does the City of Lake Oswego own the property?
No, but under the process, when property is proposed for annexation, if the city manager believes from some evidence that it may qualify for designation, then the city manager staff would submit the application to the Planning Commission.
Okay, so then, thank you. My original question, are we connecting additional properties who have also applied and or been granted the same status? Or is this the first amongst this, the good old, the Nettle Creek area?
You're asking about the connect, I'm sorry.
Huh?
Commissioner Lee, please use your request button if you'd like to make a
I
comment.
don't think the word granted, I think this is being imposed. The city is imposing this upon the landowners. Capiche? Yeah?
Because the property owners applied to annex to the city. So
Right.
the city manager has initiated this quasi-judicial amendment
Thank you.
in order to apply the protections before the property comes into the city. Or
Of the
as
other,
it comes in.
okay, then I guess I'll rephrase my question. Of the other adjacent properties, and it could be 2 or 3 north or south of the property, have they all been, question 1, have they all been annexed and part of the city?
Yes, the
1,
ones south
and
have.
2, do they also have the wetland designation or the designations that the city is mandating this property owner for annexation?
I think that's a question for Planner Espy to talk about the related properties.
So 13560 is annexed into the city, and then also the group of properties that are directly south of 13580 are also annexed and subdivided. And they have gone through, well, when they were annexed, both the zoning designation and the RP and HBA resources were
So
assigned
13598,
properties.
That,
Yeah,
that has a house on it, and the house is literally in that little green area.
right?
It's right there, and all the other ones they're all done.
correct.
Okay, how about north of that?
13560 is vacant, and then north of 13560 is in Clackamas County, or is unincorporated, not annexed. 13548 is not annexed,
Thank you.
at the very top of the map.
Commissioners, any other questions? Planner SB?
So my question then is, this is a quid pro quo. We'll annex you, but you have to set aside these or you have to understand that these areas are now RP or HBA, right?
Well, I think like any zoning, when a property comes into the city, it is subject to city zoning standards. Some of them are use standards. What can you do on this property? It's single-family dwelling, et cetera, sort of thing. Some of them are habitat protection, sensitive lands
Yeah,
protection.
I have no issue, but it's, we'll do this if you accept this.
Well, it's up to the property owner to decide whether to proceed with annexation.
Or contest the findings, I guess.
Yes, and that's why we're having the hearing, right.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for staff? None? Oh, Vice Chair Pepe, sorry.
If proceedings go the direction of approval, the maintenance of and the requirements to maintain the new designation falls under the landowner? Or is that now correct? Because they'd be annexed into the city. Is that?
That would be under the ownership of the landowner and subject to their maintenance.
And I guess I just go back to Attorney Boone's request that we focus on, the criteria for this application, or whether this, the testimony tonight meets that criteria in our approval decision. So I think we are getting a little bit separate from the hearing before us tonight. So I don't see any other questions or comments. I'd like to move to the testimony. So I believe next on our agenda is the applicant's testimony. Is there any applicant testimony that would?
The city is the applicant, so that was sort of wrapped into the staff report.
Okay. I understand, but I wanted to call it out.
Right.
Make sure that there's no other further testimony. We want, in our hearings, we want to make sure that we hear from everybody. I think that's the goal of the commission. We want to make sure that nobody gets missed or that we missed any testimony, so thank you. Next is testimony from anybody that wishes to testify in support of the application. Is there anyone that wishes to testify in support? If you'd like to state your name for the record and any organization you represent.
My name is Ed Tromke. I'm an attorney with Jordan Ramus. Been a resident of the city for almost 30 years, and my office has been in the city for about 22 of those years. Beside me, here, go ahead.
I'm Jeff Parker, the property purchaser.
And Joseph Schaefer, a land use planner I work for Ed Tromke at Jordan Ramus.
Thank you. If you'd like to go ahead and give your testimony tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope that wasn't me.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. A question first before we start the clock. Mr. Boone, if we are to submit written testimony, we'd need to keep the record open, I understand. Would that delay, other than delaying action tonight, would that delay the October consideration by City Council of the annexation? Or is it unlikely to have any impact on that?
I think Planner Espy is in charge of the scheduling, so we'll talk to that.
The reason why we had to have an October hearing date is because of primarily because of the council recess in August, and things wouldn't be able to be finished up by then. So I think there is sufficient buffer, as long as there isn't a long delay period. Yeah, I think that would
It'll just be to the next planning commission meeting.
Yep.
Thank you for that. I'm going to submit some written testimony.
Iris, no written material may be submitted tonight, although you're submitting it into the record. So if you request the continuation, which...
We're requesting the continuation by submitting.
Right, so that will be distributed to the commissioners then during the interim here, and will be reviewed for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. When you get an opportunity to read this, I'm not going to read it to you, which was my other option. You'll see that we are supporting generally the application of a mapping to this property so that it can be annexed. However, in doing the ESEE analysis, there are a few things that we don't think staff has taken adequate consideration of. The first is that there is an economic impact to this. The economic impact being that Mr. Schaefer here pulled the assessor's valuations of the 8 lots that are adjacent to this property. You can see them up on the map. And they have an average market value of $1,629,000 and $9. So, and they range from a high of about $2.5 million down to a low of $840,000. The amount of economic activity from each lot that gets developed is going to be significant if we just take the average of that $1.6 million of economic activity. That's significant. That's not something that should be omitted. In addition, the property tax paid by those lots runs from a high of $32,500 down to a low of $9,700 with an average of $21,000. Again, significant impact. That doesn't count or even look at the amount of economic impact of the people who live in those houses, what the economic impact they'll have on the city of Lake Oswego, spending money, shopping, doing everything else that they do in the city. It's a significant impact. So the economic impact is conflicting with the resource value. We don't quibble with what the staff report says, that there's a very hard to determine economic impact of maintaining the wetland. However, eliminating housing is a significant impact. There are also social consequences. There's a housing shortage. Everyone knows this. The legislature's enacted needed housing statutes. They've adopted HB 2001, which you have either just adopted a zoning code for or are in the middle of doing it. I'm also a city attorney in several cities, so we're all fighting this fight right now to catch up with what the state is doing, trying to get housing built, because there is a shortage of it. But there are social impacts to not developing the property and eliminating a lot of land from the housing supply. There are environmental consequences. By eliminating housing this close to the high school and the junior high school, kids either are going to be driven to the schools or they're going to from further away. They won't be able to walk or ride their bikes, which kids do. And that contributes to the greenhouse gas problems that we have. So there are also environmental consequences. It puts traffic on the streets and has other untoward consequences. The same thing with the last of the E's. The energy consequences are significant because of that, in terms of having people have to travel further. The housing that does get built would be pushed out to, and dare I say this, the 205 belt, which is sort of off limits right now. It has to go somewhere. It's going to go somewhere. And that's where it would end up having to go. So what are we proposing here? We're proposing that the sensitive lands overlay, the 50-foot setbacks, as you weigh and balance the economic and social and other impacts against the protection impacts of the wetland, it doesn't need a 50-foot setback. The city had, as you just heard a few minutes ago, a 30-foot setback not too long ago. The city can survive and will survive better with more flexibility in locating more homes on this site and not having the prohibited zone that is 2.9 acres when the wetland itself is about 50% of that. The setback area is much bigger. And so there is a significant impact. And in conclusion, the city should not apply the RP setback zones and the HBA zones to this housing, which is R5 needed housing. And we'd ask that when you do consider this, you weigh the ESEE consequences seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Lee?
I guess I'm confused. I thought we were hearing from people who were for the proposal.
If you'd like to respond to the question, yeah.
Yes, sure. We are in favor of...
With modifications.
With modifications, correct. And we don't consider them terribly large consideration. We'd say they're tweaking it somewhat.
So you want the 50-foot setback protected riparian area to be what?
Well, it needs to, probably just needs to be not applied at the moment, and when housing is proposed, that it then be imposed after the fact, because we don't know how the layout of the sites are going to have to be, and we don't want it to prohibit housing. So delay the imposition of the setbacks. They might be 20 feet, 10 feet, but require that if you take 100 square feet of the RP zone here, make them added back in somewhere else. Make the imposition of it a little more flexible so that housing can be built.
Interesting. Yeah, you know, some of your points, we do have a housing shortage, but it's not in the $1 million to $3 million price range. It's more like cottage clusters, and I don't propose, or I don't, and again, that's outside of our purview, so we can't address that. So I think if the city has studied this and feels it's the right thing to do, and we have diminishing...
Well, Commissioner Lee, why don't we save deliberation until after all the testimony is received?
Commissioners, any other questions? Maybe a question for staff is that we heard from the testimony that they're referring it to as a setback, but I believe we designated it as a buffer zone. Is that correct? Is there any distinguishing characteristics between setback and buffer?
Only that the wetland buffer is embedded in the code as a part of establishing the wetland resource.
And maybe a question for Attorney Boone. Does the commission have the ability to recommend adjustments to the buffer zone? I mean, would that be a possible recommendation that the commission could consider?
I think the staff position is no. The city has a sensitive lands protection program which was reviewed and analyzed to comply with Goal 5. Okay? So the question tonight is whether or not the particular resource qualifies for protection under the designated resource. Any adjustments would be a legislative decision through the zone. You know,
right.
We don't, we don't tailor-make zoning code in a quasi-judicial hearing.
Correct, thank you. No further questions. Thank you for your testimony tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Iris, was there anyone else who wished to give testimony in support of the application? No. All right. Next, we'd like to move to parties that are in opposition of the application. There was no one who was in opposition. We're looking for anybody that would like to give testimony in opposition to the application. So after that, we'll hear for parties that are neither for or against. Vice Chair Pape.
I believe you were wanting to speak in favor?
Oh, in favor, okay. So we do have another testimony in support. Yeah.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
If you'd like to just state your name for the record.
Yeah, I'm Ruchi Thanawala. I speak representing myself and Jonathan Jesnick. We're the owners of the house at 13592 Goodall Road, abutting the proposed sensitive lands map. We speak in favor of this proposed sensitive lands map for multiple reasons. The first is, which we believe that the wetlands area that's mapped here is probably greater in extent than what was identified at this time. As our property abuts the land in the back, there was dirt that was moved there in late fall, that after which that dirt was moved, shifted waterway into our backyard, underlying our daughter's playground, and now we have a formed creek that's along that area. We actually had come to City Hall a couple of months ago to identify what work was being done because of the extent of the way in which the water has been moved over, to the point now we have to do $10,000 to $12,000 of work to install further drainage. Additionally, we believe that this is important wetlands area, as we've identified multiple species in the area, including bald eagles, great blue herons, and coyotes that use this area as natural habitat. And third, in regard to the social impact, having wetlands near where children live and near a school is important for the positive social impact we recognize of having green spaces for the well-being of the people who already live there, which Jonathan Jesnick and I reflect those individuals, and children who do walk to school in those areas. We believe that the more accurate natural layout of the sensitive wetlands is the 50-foot setback, an argument for that, and probably reflected that area better before the dirt was moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? No? Thank you for your testimony. Next is, sorry for the feedback. Again, is any person wishing to testify in opposition? None? We'll move on. Any person who wishes to testify either for or against? No. So at this,
We do have one person. Let me move them over.
okay.
Mr. Wallace Leak.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Then I believe we don't have any further testimony, public testimony. So at this time, I would like to close the public testimony and move on to the next section. So Attorney Boone, I believe the commission can now go into deliberations, or any other
not yet.
processes. Okay, sorry.
Right, not yet. Since the city is the applicant, I wonder, does the city wish to submit any rebuttal at this point?
I don't have any rebuttal, no.
Okay, thank you. Then, and I'll just read this for everybody's understanding of the process. Prior to closing the public hearing, any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. If a request is made, the public hearing is either continued to a date certain, not less than 7 days later, or the record will remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing to enable additional written evidence or testimony to be submitted, and the commission would establish the period for any rebuttal written evidence to be submitted. We have had a request to leave the record open from the owner or the purchaser of the property. So it's up to the commission then to decide whether or not to continue the public hearing, which would provide the opportunity for any persons to appear at the next meeting to testify orally, and if they submit written material prior to the time, then for the commission to consider that written material, or close the public hearing to oral testimony and then just receive additional written testimony prior to the time of the hearing, to continuation. I think the person who requested it said they did submit additional written material. So if that's the case, if that's what the commission wants to do, typically we establish time for additional written materials, which would be 1 week for any additional written materials, which would be the 20th, and then the 22nd for any rebuttal written materials to to any allegations and evidence that is in the written materials submitted by the 20th. Okay, so it's limited to the written materials by the 22nd. That allows staff time to, by Friday, then to put out a memo to the commission indicating what written materials have been received and analyzing it relative to the criteria for your next meeting on the 27th. So that would be the timeline usually applied by the DRC for that kind of continuation for written materials only.
Thank you, Attorney Boone. So I guess the question before the commission here is, do we wish to continue the hearing? And if we do wish to continue, as Attorney Boone had mentioned, do we want to close it for oral testimony and just allow written testimony to come into the hearing? Yeah, my recommendation would be to continue and to close it for oral testimony, but take in the written testimony. And then, of course, we'll follow all the procedures that Attorney Boone has outlined. That I believe the deadline for the new testimony would be on the 20th, rebuttal would be on the 22nd, and then staff would prepare the report for us for our 27th meeting. That was my understanding. Commissioners, comments? Yeah. Can we maybe make a motion then? So let's see, there's a motion to continue the hearing. It'll be closed to oral testimony, but open for written testimony with all the time requirements that Attorney Boone has outlined.
And just for clarity's close of business for those dates.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion's approved. We'll continue the hearing then. We'll take in the new written testimony. It'll be closed to oral testimony. So thank you. And I think this concludes item number 7, the public hearing. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, other business. So item 8.1 on our agenda is a continuation of the residential non-conforming development, LU 22-002. The commission will discuss its observations from its May 23rd, 2022 tour of non-conforming development remodels and discuss a general work plan and schedule for reviewing regulations for continuation of residential non-conforming developments. No action is to be taken this evening. And again, public comments are accepted. Iris, was there anybody that had indicated they wish to comment on this tonight? Item number 8.1, our tour.
Carol Okert was going to testify or comment, but she hasn't arrived yet.
Okay, yeah, please let us know if she arrives.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Were there any comments that staff wanted to provide, or I'd just open it up for the commission discussion within the commission?
Thank you, Chair. You're really just opening it up to the commission to debrief on the tour. Thanks.
Commissioners, comments. First, I'd like to thank staff for taking the time out and giving us the excellent tour and all the excellent background. So really appreciated. I found it very informative to go out and really see firsthand what examples were of non-conforming development remodels. I really liked touring the different neighborhoods, the Old Town area, and then we also looked at the first edition with Carol. We saw examples there, so I thought it was very informative. Commissioners, any comments that you'd like to make? Vice Chair Pepe?
I would typically echo what Chair Heap said in appreciation of staff organizing that. That was very, very enlightening, and being able to see the different challenges that each neighborhood that we were able to visit faces, and gave a lot of pause for thought and how to address this. So thank you.
I think the other thing that was fairly informative was to kind of just understand what was in the scope, what would be the scope of the Plan Commission and what would be outside of scope. You know, when this first kicked off, there was a lot of, a lot of work that was going to be done, and I'd say a fair portion of it fell outside of the scope of the Plan Commission. So as we looked at that, and we looked at, what was the development code aspects of it that would, might come before the Plan Commission, and that we'd be looking at. That was very helpful too. Director Siegel, is there any comments you'd like to make on the upcoming work plan and kind of what are the next steps for the commission that we envision as we go forward and start looking at non-conforming development remodels?
Well, sure, and really the tour was, the hope was that that might trigger or prompt some some observations relating to the development code, which you've pointed out is really the focus of this work. The other work that the city's doing relating to demolitions, the council approved the change in the definition to demolitions. So as of June 2nd, any major remodel or alteration that amounts to 50% or more of the removal of the exterior walls or the perimeter foundation is now, that's now a demolition. So that's going through the demolition permit process. So that whole body of work dealt with what's being removed from the site. And I think what you were looking at on your tour and what we're hoping to get some feedback and direction on is how do you want to approach remodels where we're adding on to the site, it's a non-conforming development, and we're adding volume to the building, or we're moving closer to the property line, or we're making other changes where the development code today affords flexibility to be able to maintain and continue those non-conforming rights. And I think what we heard during the demolition review of the demolition policy was sort of a combination of concerns about what's being removed and how that impacts neighbors and how we want to keep the community informed on that. We also heard that where, in the course of remodeling or demolishing, we're adding on to the building and it's somehow imposing on the neighborhood, and that there's a concern about the impacts of that. So really the future, the next steps on this are really largely dependent on what the Planning Commission's reaction is to what you've seen, or if there's more that you would like us to research, or more examples that you would like to look at before we scope this, because really what we're trying to do is define the problem. And what we've heard, we heard there was a problem with demolitions, and we think that we've addressed that, and we'll continue to work on that as the council looks at the demolition tax. But we're still trying to focus on what is the problem with what's being added, or what's being what is the result of a remodel where there's a non-conforming development, and is there a policy issue there or not?
Right. Thank you, Director Siegel. So that's something that the commission can start to think about and review, and then we can work with staff to try to provide opinions and requests and to the work that the commission would like to do to kind of address the issues that Director Siegel just raised. So, what are the things that fall within the scope of the development code that the Plan Commission can help resolve any potential problems that may exist. So, any other final comments, or we'll close with that? Commissioner Lee?
I have a comment, and that is, I think it needs some definitions. I didn't go to planning college. I didn't take planning in college, and this is really very complicated stuff that you do every day, and you've got it imprinted, but I need some more context, I guess. Education. What's the definition of non-conforming, and why am I looking at this? And do neighborhood overlays impact that?
Yeah, take a look at the staff report from the February 28th work session.
That's what I need to.
Yeah, and we can follow
February
up on
what?
this. February 28th.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I can send that back out to the commission if you'd like, and then we could schedule an agenda item to have more conversation.
I would appreciate if you would send that at least to me. Thank you.
Right. Nothing else, and thank you, Director Siegel and commissioners, for everyone who attended. I think for the tours, the next tour that we're looking at was to tour the Palisades Neighborhood Association and look at their ideas for an overlay, a very specific overlay in a certain timed area where development has been done. And so I think we're planning that sometime towards August. I'll have to go back. There may be some opportunities before then to do another tour, but we'll keep working on it. So we'll move on then to the next agenda item. This is agenda item 8.2. This is the upcoming nominations and elections for chair and vice chair. Director Siegel, is there any updates you'd like to provide us on nominations? And then maybe if you'd just like to summarize the process for, the election of the chair and vice chair that we'll be following.
Yeah, sure, Chair Heap. So election of officers is held the first meeting in July every year, so that'll be July 11th. And, there's an open call, I think the chair put out for any nominations, and so anyone you would like to nominate, including if you wanted to nominate yourself for chair or vice chair, please just let me know, or Iris, you can send it to both of us. And that way, ahead of the July 11th meeting, we would put together a ballot, or, if there's more than one nominee for any position, we would put that together so that you can hold an election, vote on that on the 11th. I believe that we have received one set of nominations, one being Commissioner Leak nominated for chair, and I believe Commissioner Phillips for vice chair. That's the only input that we've received so far.
Great, thank you. And all commissioners, I would say that, if you're interested in serving as chair or vice chair, please consider it. Get any nominations in, and then again, we'll vote at the first meeting in July. But it's exciting to see that the Plan Commission will have some new leadership and move forward. So thank you, everyone, for that. One other thing I'll bring up on other business wasn't on the agenda, but I'll just mention it. I did meet, I think it was several weeks ago, at least 3 or 4 weeks ago, with the chair of the Tigard Plan Commission. So he was interested in just learning information about the Plan Commission on Lake Oswego, some of the processes that we follow. And then I believe he's also running for council. So, I shared, some of the great work that staff does, shared, how I think it's valuable, at least in Lake Oswego, that we have, 2 different bodies. We have a Development Review Commission and we have a Plan Commission. I think some of the concerns that the Tigard Commission has is just the speed at which they have to operate. And to me, it felt like maybe some of that was guided by, you have a single commission that's looking at, land applications, and they're also looking at legislation. And so it becomes, a lot of work to do, and you got to get it done very quickly. So as you see tonight, I think we like to make sure that we hear from everybody, that, we take testimony in. The other thing that's really good that I'm not sure it happens at all the communities, but, we take the time to make an initial recommendation, then staff comes back with findings, conclusions, and order. So sometimes, that it seems like in other communities it compresses, and so that was some of their concerns they had, was the speed. But I did like the fact, and I hope, commissioners here consider serving on a council too, because I like, there's a lot of land use matters that we're involved with, and having that experience, carry up into council, I think is very beneficial. So the more experience we have, along with the finance, but the land use work that the commission does, that experience is very valuable. So, I encourage everybody to consider, applying that to council at some time. And I think that was it for my update for the meeting. So Director Siegel, we'll move on to item number 9, the schedule review. Would you like to give us an update on the schedule?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Heap. And one other item that I wanted to mention and ask for a volunteer from the commission. The Neighborhood Coalition of Lake Oswego is an organization that was established by neighborhood associations, and the city helped facilitate that. in order to, primarily in order to maintain liability insurance for neighborhood associations. And so that's something that, we support, but it's an independent organization. They meet annually in June. Their bylaws call for that. And they do have, there is a representative from the Planning Commission who serves as a liaison to that group. And, excuse me, thank you. And I believe the current chair is Bob Irvin, and trying to think, Diana Boone, I think maybe the vice chair. And so they're looking for a planning commissioner who would be able to join that group when they meet later this month. And tentatively, they're looking at either June 29th, sometime between 8:30 in the morning and 1, or June 30th, sometime between 1 and 4. So just wanted to put that out there if anyone is interested in supporting that. And it's a fairly low level of effort in terms of your commitment. It's really just one meeting a year. And they go over, of course, their insurance and make sure that it's meeting their needs. And it's also a venue for neighborhood associations. If there's something else that, they wanted to take up, they could. But so I'll just kind of put that out there, and you're welcome to either contact me or Iris, if you're interested, or perhaps if there's a volunteer tonight. And the other updates, the schedule update, your next meeting is, excuse me, June 27th, and there will be a work session on the next phase of our housing policy work, House Bill 2003, housing needs and housing production. There will also be an update, more than a work session, but an update on the state's climate-friendly and equitable communities rules. And both of those, sorry, anything that you wanted to respond to there, or we?
I think I'll just respond really briefly. I think we had indication that Carol Oakert is available, and I believe she wished to comment on the tour. Was that correct? So let's, if we can, let's let Director Siegel finish with the schedule, and then we'll come back to the.
Oh, thank you. I'm almost finished with the schedule. I'm glad to hear that Ms. Oakert can join you this evening. So just a couple of notes on the housing work and the climate-friendly and equitable communities work. The City Council will be discussing both items in a study session on June 21st. Obviously, the rules on climate and equity from the state are new. They were adopted by the Land Conservation Development Commission at the end of May, and we're still digesting all of it. It's a fairly large body of work, and it's going to really set the direction for a lot of the planning work that we do over the next couple of years. So it's another kind of phase of mandated planning, and the council will, certainly want to take a look at that and provide direction, just as they did for House Bill 2001, to make sure that we're engaging the Planning Commission and the community on that. So that's your next meeting on the 27th, and then on the 11th of July, we had tentatively, in addition to the continuation of the hearing you had this evening, we had tentatively scheduled a second work session on the non-conforming development issue. So we will revisit the questions that we were asking tonight, and I'll redistribute the background and the definitions in the staff report that we initially started to go over with the Planning Commission in February. But I think that might be a good way to sort of pick up where we left off, and I just didn't want to presume any policy direction from the tour, because it sounded like there wasn't a lot of direction yet. So anyway, those are your next two meetings, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions on the schedule, Director Siegel? No? All right, and then we'll come back then to the other business, the item 8.1 on our agenda. This was the continuation of residential non-conforming development, and discussing the tour. As we had mentioned, the commission did tour the First Edition neighborhood, as well as the downtown, Old Town area, and other areas of Lake Oswego with Ms. Oakert. So Ms. Oakert was part of the public that was attending our tour. Ms. Oakert, would you like to share your observations and any comments that you wish to make.
Hi, Chair Heap.
Hey.
Thanks very much for giving me the opportunity just to chat in with you guys this evening. I wanted to really take the time to thank you for going out and seeing the different examples in the neighborhood. Really appreciate that the Planning Commission is taking such an active interest in doing that. And I think that what you saw was that there are a lot of different situations, that it really is varied as you go from one situation to another. One of the things that I hope that you get a chance to talk about are in some of the different ways that this can be handled. And staff had put together some great examples from other codes in other communities that talked about the different ways that they handled the nonconformities that would come up. And one of the ones I wanted to be sure to call your attention to was Atherton's. In the staff's workup, they had some really interesting things to say about what Atherton's approach was to looking at these different ways to handle nonconformities. What they had put forward, and again, staff would be the able to expand on it more than I could, was that they were saying that with if it was 50% or more, that they would have to conform with current standards. Under 50%, then there were opportunities to look at what could be done, and that that there were ways to have community participation in trying to explore the impacts of pre-existing nonconformities, and especially what that would mean in a development that was being continued in a project. So anyway, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to chat with you during your discussion period this evening. And again, thank you for coming out and actually looking at the practical examples. That's about it.
Right, thank you, Ms. Wilkert, and yeah, thank you and the other members of the public that came with the commission. I would just ask, as we're discussing with Director Siegel, part of what we have to look at now is, what are the specific problems that the Plan Commission would want to take on related to development code and to planning. And so I would encourage anybody from the neighborhood associations and yourself to provide any feedback if there's any specific requests that you think the Plan Commission should be looking at, to share that with us, and then we'll discuss with staff, on what some of the possible next steps are. But thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah. Good night. So I think that was it. Next is adjournment. So I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Aye.